what the heck were we doing there in the first place? There was no imminent threat. So this was absolutely a war of choice by Donald Trump and his administration. Under our Constitution, that's illegal. You have to come to Congress to explain what you are doing. This is one of the reasons why this was such a terrible decision by this administration to enter into war with Iran by choice. We saw what happened in Minneapolis. 2 of our fellow Americans were unnecessarily killed because of the lack of training and the way they were operating on America's streets. And we and the American people, both Democrat and Republican, said this is completely unacceptable.
Bienvenidos a su podcast Prensa Arizona. Muy buenas tardes. Y bueno, pues hoy tenemos a un invitado muy importante, exalcalde de la ciudad de Phoenix y bueno, pues ahora congresista en Washington. Le damos la bienvenida a Greg Stanton. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, first of all, we have to talk about this DHS closure. It was supposed to come to an end, but you're telling me it's not. So how is that working? Because you have to pay those TSA workers. So how is it going?
Look, this is one of the great self-owns by the Republicans in congressional history. As you know, 2 weeks ago, there was a bipartisan Senate agreement. Mm-hmm. Bipartisan meaning every single senator, Republican and Democrat, agreed that we would fund DHS, except for ICE, to ensure that the TSA workers that are working so hard at the airport, FEMA workers who work so hard to help families that are dealing with natural disaster emergencies, Coast Guard workers and their families would be fully paid. That bill came to the House. It was a no-brainer. Just pass the bill. Get these hardworking Americans paid. Instead, the Speaker decided to give in to the extreme right, and they wanted to make sure that they funded ICE without any policy changes. So we voted no, and we went home in no man's land. That's when TMZ started following these members of Congress around, asking them, why are you traveling to Scotland or on vacation when you should be in Washington voting to make sure that these people get paid? We're going to be going back on Tuesday. We should be there right now working on this. I wish I was there right now working on this because it's so important. But we'll be back. We'll be voting on Tuesday to do the Senate deal. I think Mike Johnson changed his mind and realized what a big mistake it was. So now we're going backwards and doing exactly what should have been done 2 weeks ago. So the TSA agents will be fully compensated, as will the other agencies of DHS, but not ICE. You can't ask me or the other Democrats to fund ICE unless they make significant changes about how they go about their business. It's dangerous to our fellow Americans, and we're not going to allow it to be funded unless there are real changes.
Just as a reminder, what are those changes you're asking for?
I mean, basically, if you're going to operate on American streets almost like you're a police officer, then you have to have the training and equipment of a police officer. Take the mask off, use body cameras, get a warrant if you're actually a judicial warrant if you're going to enter someone's personal area, a house or other personal area. You actually have to have a use of force policy. There has to be independent investigations. That's exactly what the American people expect of anyone that would operate on streets. We saw what happened in Minneapolis. 2 of our fellow Americans were unnecessarily killed because of the lack of training and the way they were operating on America's streets. And we and the American people, both Democrat and Republican, said this is completely unacceptable. Look, the Republicans gave ICE in the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill $75 billion. It's bigger than the United States Marine Corps. They didn't give any additional requirements on training or equipment or anything. What happened was virtually inevitable to occur. The American people are saying, knock it off. Let's go back to a targeted enforcement regime, not mass deportation. The American people are responding incredibly negatively to the way the Trump administration is going about their business. And we're saying we're not going to do any funding of this agency unless these massive, important, and substantive changes occur.
So how confident are you that this bill will pass?
Well, the bill that's going to fund everything but ICE is going to pass. Yeah, that I have no doubt that it's going to pass. So the TSA agents are going to get paid, et cetera. But this issue about how ICE operates in America is not going to go away as an issue. The American people are very clear. We do not want mass deportation in the United States of America. We don't want our fellow colleagues at work, family members, people go to church with, friends that we know who have not engaged in any problematic activities to be detained and deported. In fact, what they're demanding is that we actually pass an immigration reform bill that gives those same people a path to citizenship. Not a path to deportation, an actual path to citizenship. That's what the American people are actually demanding.
Well, the Republicans claim doxing and assaults on ICE agents. That's why they don't want the masks removed. But we see them at the airports with no masks. What do you think about that?
I was mayor of a major American city. We helped to oversee one of the largest police departments in America. Phoenix police officers are in some of the toughest jobs in America, deal with incredibly dangerous situations. They're not wearing masks on the streets. In fact, they have their name tag, they have the jurisdiction, they tell exactly what department that they work for. All of that is public. That's part of transparency in law enforcement. And there's no reason for ICE to be exempt from that same standards that we would apply to others in law enforcement.
So what do you think about ICE in airports and not wearing a mask?
Well, not only should they not be wearing a mask, they shouldn't even be there. We have TSA agents who are properly trained for operating in an airport setting. We need to make sure those TSA agents get paid properly because it's a very important job. And they don't need ICE sitting around doing nothing, watching them. That was a showtime thing by this Trump administration. It was not a substantive thing. So ICE has no business being in America's airports wearing a mask or not. They shouldn't be there in the first place. But obviously it did show that they can do their job without wearing a mask.
Yes. Well, let's go to Iran. So what is your reading on what's happening right now with this reported ceasefire?
Well, like probably most Americans, my head is spinning. What the heck were we doing there in the first place? And I ask that because, as you know, the President of the United States made no attempt to come to Congress and therefore the American people and explain what was his objective. Strategically, how are they going to accomplish it? What's their exit strategy? What are you trying to accomplish in this regard? Remember, there was no imminent threat. So this was absolutely a war of choice by Donald Trump and his administration. Under our Constitution, that's illegal. You have to come to Congress to explain what you are doing. So yes, I am, like everyone, relieved that Donald Trump did not fulfill his horrific threat that he made in the last few days to destroy an entire civilization of Iran. But I don't know what the United States accomplished, if anything. If the suggestion was he opened the Strait of Hormuz, well, the strait was opened before we started this action in Iran. What certainly it has done is to really destroy the reputation of the United States around the globe as a trusted partner. As you know, the president is openly discussing leaving NATO because he feels like the NATO countries did not support us. But this was after a year or more of him disparaging our NATO partners, threatening to invade Greenland, calling Canada the 51st state. NATO is the most successful military defense alliance in world history. And this president is threatening to destroy it. So I would argue, certainly I'm glad that there's not active hostilities going on in Iran right now. But I think virtually every American, Republican or Democrat, is asking, what the hell was this president thinking in getting us into this war of choice without really having any plan or strategy or plan to how are we going to define success and therefore have an exit strategy?
Well, actually, Israel is striking and is breaking this ceasefire, and Iran already closed the Hormuz Strait again.
We need to get the parties to the table right away and reestablish the comprehensive ceasefire so that there are no more hostilities in this region.
So how critical is this Strait of Hormuz? And what is your perspective on how it's impacting everyday Americans?
Well, there is no doubt that gas prices have gone up significantly as a result of this terrible decision by Donald Trump. There is simply no two ways about it. But you know what else is to bring up to the table? This president has done everything he can to eliminate clean energy options, alternative energy, like solar, like wind, which our energy companies need desperately for stability of the grid and for lowering energy prices. So if this war has taught us anything, instead of moving away from clean and green energy, the United States should actually get back in the business of leading the world. Now, I was actively involved in passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the largest American investment in clean energy in American history. The one big beautiful bill that was passed with only Republican votes got rid of all of the investments that we had made that was placed in the United States as a world leader. And so the United States is falling behind the rest of the world when it comes to investment in clean energy, and that is to our long-term detriment. So there's many lessons to be learned from this tragic mistake that this president has made, but one of them is the United States should lessen its dependence on oil and have a more all-of-the-above energy supply system, including and especially more clean energy options. That will actually lower energy prices for American families.
So what do you think the Arizonans should be preparing for if those tensions rise again?
Well, look, this is a really challenging thing because, the president, when it comes to Ukraine, flip sides. We were solidly supporting Ukraine in this unjust war, illegal war by Russia, trying to take over many parts of Ukraine. We changed sides on them. Now we have gone in and gone after Iran in a complete war of choice, an illegal war, because it wasn't authorized by Congress as required by the United States competition. Of course, oil prices rose. And what did this president do? He got rid of sanctions on both Russian oil and Iranian oil, putting billions of dollars into the economy of Russia and billions of dollars into the economy of Iran. Exactly the opposite. He's elongated the war in Ukraine as a result. And of course, at the same time, we have to be always watching for other threats to the United States security. And by losing focus, by getting involved in a war of choice in Iran, we are less able as a country now to fend off any potential challenge from another country. So from a security perspective, from a national strategic security perspective, we have put ourselves at a great disadvantage. There are so many reasons why this was a poor choice by the President of the United States.
Talking about that, one of the points of the agreement was that Iran will control the Strait of Hormuz and charge $2 million for each boat with oil. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that first off, this has to be made absolutely clear. I do not want the regime in Iran to stay. I think that it has for almost 50 years, this regime has been very bad for the people of Iran and for the region and for the world. But if we want to be successful in this regard, what is the best approach? And certainly the approach that the president has chosen is the wrong approach. We actually had in place an agreement with Iran to stop the growth of their nuclear weapons. And as you know, Trump in his first administration got us out of that agreement. Does anyone doubt that we were in a much better position vis-a-vis Iran at the day before he pulled out of the agreement than we are right now? And of course, he was trying to negotiate a very similar type deal. I do support sanctions on the Iranian regime, and I want to continue sanctions on the Iranian regime. So the idea that we would leave this war in a situation in which we essentially have relieved Iran of all sanctions And of course, the 10-point deal doesn't have a lot of detail to it, so the devil is always going to be in the details. That's not an acceptable situation to me. We need to work with the people of Iran. We need to work on building alliances in the region, in Europe, Asian countries. That's how the United States can more project power. This is a fundamental disagreement between myself and this administration. They think we project power as a country by having the largest weapon systems and using them around the globe trying to do regime change. We have the strongest military on planet Earth. There's no doubt about it. But the strength of America, the ability for us to really project power, is based on our alliances, are having a good working relationship with Mexico and Canada in North America, by having good working relationships with Europe and working with them economically, and with Asian countries in near China. That's how we're going to win this economic battle with China. That's how we're going to win the hearts and minds of the world, not by having the biggest military and using it. And it's really sad that this president has presented a budget to Congress with a $500 billion increase in defense spending and cutting all the programs that families listening to this rely on, including healthcare spending, including SNAP, including education dollars. It takes our priorities and flips them on its head, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes America powerful. We can't be America alone. That makes us weak, in my opinion.
So, I guess we are all asking the same thing. When we might see some relief with this gas prices, and also for those farmers on fertilizers?
Well, you've now raised another important issue, because this president did the tariff policy in which he first off did tariffs on Canada and Mexico. I was the lead in the United States Congress to undo the illegal tariffs on Mexico. In all the work, you and I have worked together a long time, and all the work that I've done, whether at city council, mayor, or now in Congress, is trying to build a stronger working relationship between the United States and Mexico, in particular Arizona and Mexico. Putting a tariff regime in place at the same time we're trying to renegotiate and modernize the USMCA is completely backwards about how you engage in international relations. And the same thing with our European partners, et cetera. So we slapped these major tariffs on China. Our American farmers were getting crushed by that decision because they were selling a lot of their products into China. The president has to go over to China and cut a deal, which essentially got us back to status quo. We haven't accomplished anything. And it's a failure of understanding how the international economy actually works, in my opinion. When are gas prices going to go down? I mean, obviously, until there is a sense that there is long-term stability in the energy markets, I don't see it's going down for a while. This is one of the reasons why this was such a terrible decision by this administration to enter into war with Iran by choice.
Now you talk about the tariffs. What have you learned with the people in your district of how this is affecting them?
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, I took Greg Fraley from Falco, an aluminum company, specialized aluminum company that takes aluminum products and fashions into items that can be used in the national defense industry, so defense contractors, so things that protect American national security. The type of aluminum he needs to purchase can only come from Canada. It can't come from anywhere else inside the United States. He's paying an effective 70% increase in his prices. He can't grow his business. He can't hire new people. It's totally self-defeating. I brought him to the State of the Union as my guest because I wanted to make this point. Opposition to tariffs is not a Democratic thing. It's anyone with a brain that says that. Because look, we all know what this is about. The president wants to slap these tariffs on our neighboring countries so that they have to come beg to him for relief. But here's what he misunderstands. The United States has the strongest economy on planet Earth. That's not a permanent condition. We have to work to earn that every single year. We can't take anything for granted. We're not the strongest economy because we just exist. We're the strongest economy because the strength of our people, our diversity, the training, the entrepreneur spirit that we have in this country, the work ethic that we have in this country. But if we slap tariffs on all of our neighbors, you know what? They're going to figure out a way around us. President Sheinbaum of Mexico made this exact point when the president slapped major tariffs onto Mexico. She said, look, they didn't like them. We're going to have to live with them for now. But she says, make no mistake, over time, we're going to figure out a way around the United States of America. Prime Minister Carney of Canada went to China and made this exact point. He said, we would rather be working with America to import American vehicles. But instead, because of the tariffs, he said, they're going to China and buying much less expensive electric vehicles to bring into Canada. That's very dangerous. And when a country like Canada starts to figure out a trade system around the United States of America, bypass the United States of America, long term, that spells very bad things for our country.
So what is your reaction to Pam Bondi declining to testify before Congress? What is your...
Declining to testify, I think she doesn't... she's a lawyer, I think. Sometimes I question that with some of her decisions. But as a lawyer, she knows a subpoena ain't optional. You've got to come testify before that committee. You don't get to pick and choose. We don't care what your title is. You're not above the law. You're not above Congress. Congress is an equal branch of government, and it is not an option for her to come testify before Congress, whether she is currently Attorney General or whether she is former Attorney General. She is subject to the jurisdiction of the American Congress in terms of a subpoena. She has to testify.
So what do you think about this declaration about with Todd Blanche, now the in charge of the DOJ, and he's saying that the Epstein case is almost closed, that they complied with everything?
Well, he's wrong, and he's going to be proven wrong, and Congress is going to continue to investigate that case and to assert our right under the subpoena that was already issued and signed by the President of the United States. A law was passed by Congress demanding the full Epstein files without covering up certain names, et cetera, unless it were victims. We should see every single person that is in that files except for the victims tragically, the victims of Epstein. And that has not yet occurred, not even close. There is a long way to go to make sure the full Epstein file is revealed. It's what we owe transparency in this country, and it's what we owe the victims of these horrific crimes.
I know you're not directly related with the Epstein files, but what have you learned with this release of some files?
Why don't you say I'm not related to the files? I mean, I'm a member of Congress and we voted,
yes.
And my obligation is to fulfill the commitment that we made in taking that vote. It wasn't a thing to suggest nicely, hey, the administration, will you hand it over? Remember Pam Bondi, in one of the most ridiculous, embarrassing moments in modern presidential history, had a press conference and said, here's all the Epstein files, and it was a tiny little file of articles that were already in the public domain. They've been trying to cover up for a long period of time. The American people, by the way, Republicans feel even more strongly about this than Democrats in terms of the need for full transparency. And so I know they were trying to pull the wool over the eyes of a lot of their own supporters to suggest they've already given out the full documents. They're not fooling anybody. They have got to be fully transparent on the release of the Epstein files, and they haven't even come close to that yet.
Okay. So does the DOJ needs to release more documents from the Epstein files?
Well, as far as we know, they mentioned that there were, I think it was 6 million documents. They certainly haven't released all of those documents. And many of them are redacted to such a ridiculous level that they've effectively not released them. And they're not following the rule of law that was in the bill that was passed that President Trump himself signed. This was not signed by he signed the bill to require the full release of these documents. And yes, there's a lot more still to go.
Let's talk about this articles of impeachment for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
Well, Pete Hegseth is doing a spectacularly bad job as Secretary of Defense. It's not Secretary of War. That only Congress can change that name. What a ridiculous thing that by change the name. And he demeans the position by continuing to talk about decisions that we need to make or should have made, but the decisions that were made utilizing the war powers of the United States in religious terms, as if this is part of the Crusades from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. You are a professional. You are the Secretary of Defense. That is completely inappropriate for him to do that, to talk about this as some sort of religious war that we are having. The American people, we're so much smarter than he thinks that we are to fall for that. So, look, I mean, he's not going to be impeached. The votes aren't going to be there. He certainly deserves to be removed from that office. Here's what should happen. We need to come back next week and vote on the war powers resolution, and I believe enough Republicans will vote for that is actually something we can move forward on that has a real chance of passing, which require an up or down decision about whether this war in Iran is authorized or not authorized. I think before we talk about the impeachment of various individuals, the first thing we ought to do is have an up or down vote of Congress on the current activities in Iran.
But the last time they bring that to the floor, they vote no. Just in the representatives and the Senate as well.
That is true, and that was weeks ago. A lot has happened since then. I do believe, as I sit here right now, this time around, a war powers resolution would pass the United States Congress, and I think it would pass unanimously among my Democratic colleagues on my side, which means we'd only need 3 or 4 coming from the other side, and I think those votes are there. It's always a dangerous proposition to predict votes in advance, but I think that those votes would be there. And some people say, well, how can you have them return when they're already in theater in Iran? And I'm like, how can you ignore the Constitution? The Constitution is actually the most important thing here, that we follow the requirements of the United States Constitution. I've done interviews where some interviewers are like, well, putting the constitutional concerns aside, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, putting the constitutional concerns aside, we can't put those aside. That is the governing document of this country. And under Article 1, where we sit in Congress, only the Congress can declare war. There was no imminent threat, so this is clearly a war of choice, and it's illegal without congressional authority.
Okay, there are growing voices about the 25th Amendment. What do you think about that?
Well, 25th Amendment I view similarly to impeachment. Certainly it would be justified right now with the behavior of this president if his cabinet were to move forward with the 25th Amendment. I think the vast majority of Americans would say, yeah, that makes sense. The challenge, of course, is that it would take a 2/3 vote of the House of Representatives and a 2/3 vote of the United States Senate. And as a practical matter, the votes aren't there. But certainly that would be justified under the circumstances. The issue really is the war powers resolution. That is the one that can really impact this war policy in Iran right now. And that's the one where I think we're going to get the votes and get it done.
Looking at all of this that has been happening just in this year, how do you think it's going to impact the 2026 elections?
You know, I've been involved in public service for a long time, serving at the city, on the city council, serving as Deputy Attorney General under Terry Goddard, a great Attorney General, by the way, serving as mayor, and now in Congress. I have learned that in April of the election year, how that's going to impact November, I don't know. I mean, we need to do the right things for the right reasons and let the political chips fall where they may. And so that's how I view this, is like this war is illegal. It's bad for American economy. It puts our U.S. service women and men in danger. It lowers the United States reputation around the globe. It's going to take decades to repair from that. It was a bad decision. We need to undo that. We need to move that in the right direction. And do I believe that the voters of this country, whether Republican, Independent, or Democrat, will reward the people that take the lead on that? I do think that is the case. But, you know, a lot can happen between now and then. So I don't really view it through the lens of how it's going to help or hurt me or anyone else win in the 2026 election.
So how do you see the election here in Arizona, the gubernatorial race?
How do I see it? Well, I support Katie Hobbs. I think she's going to win. I think she's going to get another 4 years. I think she deserves another 4 years. She and I have known each other for a long period of time. We've worked closely together when she was in the legislature and I was at the city of Phoenix, and then I was in Congress. So we campaigned together in 2018. She spent a lot of time in my district campaigning, successfully so, for the Secretary of State position, and we campaigned together, and I was happy to do that. And obviously, I was happy that she beat Carrie Lake, and she did beat Carrie Lake. Despite what Carrie Lake may think, Katie Hobbs won that election. This election denialism has got to end. It is so horrific that people continue to engage in the big lie about elections. But that being said, she won that election. I think she's done a good job as governor. I think the voters of Arizona are going to reward her with another 4 years.
Well, my last question will be, are we doing enough to secure water in Arizona?
Okay, that's a really fair and difficult question. We could go double the amount of time that we've already done to just talk about water, but the answer is no. And here's what I mean. First off, I do think the governor is doing a really good job at the negotiating table, and we're making a strong case for Arizona. But I think what we, and I say we, I mean both people in elected office, business leaders, people, media leaders like yourself, need to get this message across to Arizona and around the country that if Arizona gets hit with the disproportionate amount of cuts to the Colorado River, the cuts that are coming, and so we don't get our fair share, but we get way more than our fair share of the cuts, that will be devastating in the Arizona economy. And we have a leading economy in Arizona, particularly in semiconductor, the leading industry for the future of this country, the leading industry on the planet right now. So much of what goes on with regard to semiconductor and semiconductor growth goes into national security, things that the weapon system that keep us safe. More of that activity is happening here in Arizona than anywhere else in this country. If we get hit with disproportionate cuts on water, that is going to hurt the growth of that industry, and that is harmful to the entire country, not just here in Arizona. And we need to get that message. That's where I think we could all do a better job of, is getting the message across. You know, you may be looking at, legal documents from 100 years ago. That, in so many ways, what really matters is where we are right now. Are we really going to hurt the state that has grown so much in terms of population, grown so much in terms of economic strength, grown so much in terms of leading on the key industries? Are we really willing to hurt that state and therefore hurt the national security of the United States? That's an important question. I think the answer for most people is going to be no, and we have to get that message across, and we could all be doing a better job of getting that message across.
So what will be your last message in this interview for their constituents?
Well, I'm only going to say this. I'm not going to tell anyone who they should or shouldn't vote for, but get involved in this election. Pick a candidate that you believe in. People think that these elections are won based on money. The truth is, people power is way more important. So if you feel strongly like I do, or maybe you feel strongly against everything I said, you are part of this country. Get involved in the political process. Knock on doors, make those phone calls, sign those letters and postcards to voters. Use your agency to get the people and policies that you think are right passed. That's America is a democracy. And that is our greatest strength. It's sometimes a messy democracy, but it is a democracy. And that involves citizen involvement. So that's my polite request is, to the best of your ability, get involved in these elections. The issues that we're dealing with are so critically important for the future of our country. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, Congressman Stanton. Pues bien, esta es la entrevista con el congresista Greg Stanton. Pues muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado. Los esperamos en la próxima. Bendiciones. Cuídense mucho.